Agnes Thompson had always been a woman of quiet dignity. At 85 years old, she carried herself with the poise of someone who had endured decades of life's trials without bitterness. Her silver-white hair was neatly tucked under a soft beret, and she wore a floral scarf her granddaughter had gifted her last Christmas. It was a chilly morning in Los Angeles as she made her way to the airport. She clutched a small folder with her boarding pass, Idaho, and a letter from her doctor stating her mobility issues. Agnes had arthritis in both knees and relied heavily on a cane for walking. This trip was special. It was a return from visiting her only son's family in California. She had spent 10 beautiful days with her grandchildren, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. Though tired, her heart was full. Now it was time to head back to New York. She arrived at the airport early, as she always did. Her son had offered to wheel her to the gate, but she politely declined, trusting that the airline's wheelchair service would be enough. After all, she had requested assistance weeks in advance, as she had done many times before. When she reached the assistant's desk and gently handed over her papers, the young attendant barely glanced at them. He looked around, agitated, then said with a smirk, "Lady, if every old woman like you asked for a ride, we'd go bankrupt." Agnes froze. She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "I beg your pardon?" "I said," he repeated louder this time, "we don't have a cart available. You'll have to walk. There's not much we can do." "No wheelchair? Not even someone to help me walk?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Nope. You'll be fine. Just follow the signs." She tried to protest, but the attendant had already moved on to the next customer. Agnes stood frozen for a moment, stunned by the indifference she had just encountered. The words, "go bankrupt," echoed painfully in her mind. It wasn't just a lack of a wheelchair. It was the tone, the assumption, the complete dismissal of her vulnerability. Her legs trembled, not from anger, but from fatigue and fear. But she straightened up, not because she felt strong, but because there was no other choice. She gripped her cane, adjusted her scarf, and took a deep breath. With hundreds of yards ahead of her, she began the slow journey to her departure gate. The signs above indicated a walk of 1.2 miles, nearly 2 kilometers. For most travelers, this was a minor inconvenience. For Agnes, it felt like a marathon across steel and stone. Each step was deliberate. Her left knee buckled slightly with every movement, and she leaned heavily on the cane. The wheels of her small suitcase scraped against the floor behind her. The sound was barely noticeable among the hum of rolling luggage and distant announcements. But to her, it became a rhythm of survival. She passed by families rushing toward their flights, business people talking loudly into phones, and couples sharing coffee. No one noticed her. No one saw her struggle. In this world of speed and automation, an elderly woman inching forward was almost invisible. After 20 minutes, she reached the first stretch of moving walkways. But of course, it was out of service. Agnes didn't cry. She hadn't cried since her husband passed away 10 years ago, but she stopped for a moment and sat down on a nearby bench. Her breath was shallow, her hands trembling. She tried not to let anyone see her pain. A young man in a hoodie passed by and looked at her briefly. He kept walking, then paused, turned back. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked. Agnes looked up with a weak smile. "I just need to get to gate 41, she whispered. "That's pretty far," he said, surprised. "Don't they have carts or something?" "They said no. I have to walk." He scratched the back of his head. "Man, that sucks." And then he left. Not maliciously, just unsure what to do, just like everyone else. As she stood again and began walking, her legs began to shake more noticeably. Her breath came in short gasps. Every 20 or 30 steps, she stopped to lean against a wall, pretending to check her bag or adjust her scarf, hoping it would mask her exhaustion. The worst part wasn't the pain, it was the isolation. Agnes had always believed that aging brought wisdom, but today it only brought invisibility. Her destination was getting closer, but her body was failing her. She didn't know it yet, but something was about to happen that would turn her quiet suffering into a national outcry. Agnes's vision had begun to blur. Her hands, once steady even with arthritis, now trembled uncontrollably. She tried to calculate how far she had left to go, but the signs above blurred into one long row of meaningless numbers. Her cane tapped against the tile floor like a slow, painful metronome. One step, drag the suitcase. Breathe, then again. One step. Drag, breathe. Her chest was tight, not like a heart attack, but something more subtle, like her lungs couldn't fully expand. She passed by a large digital ad for a luxury vacation in Maui. On the screen, a smiling family rode bicycles under palm trees. Agnes blinked at it. The colors were too bright. The world was too loud. She leaned against a pillar to rest again. A woman in her 30s passed by, dragging two kids in a stroller. She looked at Agnes with a momentary flicker of concern, then glanced at her watch and rushed forward. Agnes tried to walk again, but this time her knees didn't respond the way they should. She stumbled forward. Her cane clattered to the floor. She reached out instinctively to grab something, anything, but there was nothing. The floor rose to meet her like a wave. She collapsed hard, knees first, then her side. A sharp pain surged through her hip. A collective gasp echoed from the few witnesses nearby. A TSA officer spotted her and ran over. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Agnes couldn't answer. Her eyes fluttered, closed, her breath shallow. She had hit her breaking point. Within minutes, EMTs arrived and began tending to her. One of the airport staff tried to explain, "We weren't informed she needed assistance." But a bystander, a teenage girl who had been quietly filming everything, stepped forward. She asked for help. "I saw the guy at the desk. He just dismissed her. I got it on video." That sentence would change everything. As Agnes was wheeled away, unconscious, another airport worker picked up her cane and suitcase. The girl uploaded the video online with the caption, "This woman was forced to walk nearly 2 kilometers with no help. She collapsed before she even reached the gate. Shame on this airline." Within an hour, the video had tens of thousands of views. Within a day, millions. The soft beeping of machines was the first thing Agnes heard when she opened her eyes. She blinked against the sterile light above her and turned her head slowly to the right. There was a vase of lilies by the window. The curtains were drawn halfway, letting in filtered sunlight. Her body ached in places she hadn't felt in years. For a few long moments, she couldn't remember where she was. Then came the slow rush of memory, the airport, the endless walk, the hollow pain in her chest, the floor rushing toward her. A flood of embarrassment washed over her as she remembered collapsing in public. Her heart sank. Did anyone see? Had she been a burden? Did she miss her flight? Just then, a nurse walked in, a young woman with gentle eyes and a warm presence. "Good morning, Miss Thompson," she said, checking the IV. "You're stable now. You fainted from exhaustion and dehydration, but the scans came back clear. You'll be okay." Agnes nodded weakly. Her throat was dry. The nurse poured her a cup of water and handed it over. Then, as if debating whether to say something, she added softly, "You've gone viral." Agnes blinked. "What?" The nurse smiled a little. "You're trending, and there's a video of you at the airport. Someone recorded what happened, what they didn't do for you. It's all over the internet. News outlets picked it up. You're on the front page of CNN even." Agnes's eyes widened. "Oh dear," she whispered. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." But trouble had already found its way to headlines across the country. That morning, millions of people were watching a video titled, "85-year-old woman forced to walk 2 kilometers in airport, collapses before reaching gate." The footage was shaky but powerful. It showed Agnes struggling down a long terminal hallway, clutching her cane, her small suitcase wobbling behind her. The most damning moment, though, was the audio clip from the front desk. "If every old lady expects a cart, we'll go bankrupt," the employee had said. The internet did not take it lightly. Outrage erupted on social media. Hashtags like #justice, #foreignaise, and #invisible elderly trended globally. Celebrities tweeted about it. Disability advocates released statements. Comment sections flooded with stories from others who had experienced similar neglect. My father had a stroke in an airport, and no one helped. I use a walker, and they told me to hurry or miss the plane. This system is broken. Thank you, Agnes, for exposing it. Some commenters were angry, others were tearful, but all agreed Agnes should never have been left to suffer alone. Inside the headquarters of Skybridge Airlines, panic had set in. A crisis management team was assembled before sunrise. Executives stared at screens showing trending videos. Furious retweets, news anchors debating moral failures of modern travel systems. The CEO of Skybridge, Robert Lannister, stood in silence at the end of the long glass conference table. His jaw clenched as the video played again. "We can't spin this," said the PR director. "The footage is too damning. We need an apology. A real one, not corporate fluff." "I want the employee suspended immediately," Robert snapped. "He already is," someone replied. "Not enough." A younger executive suggested inviting Agnes to speak at a press conference. Another suggested creating a task force for elderly travelers. They argued over statements, damage control, brand survival, but they were all too late. Agnes had already become a symbol. Back at the hospital, Agnes's room was now filled with flowers, cards, and letters. The front desk had stopped accepting deliveries. Nurses rotated shifts just to answer phone calls from well-wishers. A handmade sign taped to the window read, "We love you, Agnes." The nurse returned with a tablet in hand. "There's something I think you should see," she said gently. She pulled up a message from a woman in Tennessee. "Dear Agnes, I saw what happened to you. I cried for an hour. My mother went through the same thing before she passed. Thank you for standing up for all of us, even if you didn't mean to." Agnes read it twice. Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to stand up for anything," she whispered. "I just wanted to go home." The nurse placed a hand on her shoulder. Sometimes the world chooses its heroes. Later that evening, a reporter from NBC News knocked on the door, along with a camera crew. They were polite, patient, and asked if she would be willing to say a few words. "I'm not very good with cameras," Agnes said. "You don't need to be," the reporter replied. "Just be yourself." Agnes nodded. She adjusted her scarf and sat upright. In front of the camera, she spoke slowly, with warmth and strength. "I don't blame that young man at the desk," she said. "Maybe he was tired. Maybe no one trained him right. But I do blame a system that lets people like me fall through the cracks." She paused, then looked directly into the lens. "I wasn't the first, but I hope I can be the last." That interview aired that night, and it changed everything. Skybridge Airlines released a new statement, one without legal jargon. They admitted fault. They promised full cooperation with a new federal audit on disability services in airports. They issued a personal apology to Agnes and offered to fund elderly traveler advocacy programs under her name. The public slowly began to calm, but something larger had shifted. It wasn't just about one woman anymore. It was about a generation that refused to be forgotten. It had been 3 days since Agnes's story took over every major media outlet. She was now a household name. Not because she sought attention, but because she had unwillingly become the face of something long ignored. When the head of Skybridge Airlines personally visited her hospital room, flanked by cameras and reporters, Agnes didn't rise to meet him. She was still too weak, but her words were powerful, measured, and clear. "You didn't come to see me," she said, looking up. "You came to be seen." The room fell silent. The CEO, clearly uncomfortable, nodded. "You're right, but I'm also here to listen." Agnes nodded slowly. "Then listen carefully." That conversation wasn't just symbolic. It was the start of real change. Within days, the airline launched a sweeping policy update. Every traveler over 70 or with a disability would automatically be assigned assistance. No additional paperwork needed. Customer service teams would be retrained, not just in logistics, but in empathy. A hotline would be created for elderly travelers, manned by human beings, not machines. But the most important change came from something Agnes herself proposed. In her now famous hospital interview, she had said, "I don't need a monument. I just want a bench, somewhere in every airport, where someone like me can sit, breathe, and not feel invisible. And so a new initiative began. Agnes's Bench, a quiet, comfortable space for elderly travelers in every Skybridge terminal. Each bench would bear a small plaque that simply read, "In honor of those who walk too far alone." When Agnes was finally released from the hospital, a crowd of supporters was waiting for her outside. Some held flowers, others held signs. One girl stood in the front row with her father and a crayon drawing of a woman with white hair and a cane, smiling on a bench. Agnes paused, overwhelmed. She had never expected any of this. Back at home, letters arrived daily from people around the world, young and old, strangers who saw her not just as a victim, but as someone who gave them voice. She received a letter from a woman in Finland who had broken her hip in an airport restroom, left unattended for hours. Another from a young flight attendant who admitted she once ignored a similar request out of stress, but vowed never to again. And then there was the letter from a 12-year-old boy who wrote, "Dear Miss Agnes, my grandma uses a walker. I didn't know airports were so mean. When I grow up, I want to make sure no grandmas fall down ever again. Your friend, Marcus." Agnes smiled when she read it. That one she pinned to her fridge. 6 weeks later, she boarded another flight, this time to Chicago. It wasn't for a hospital checkup. It was for a ceremony. Skybridge was unveiling the first of her benches. When she arrived at the airport, something was different. A wheelchair was waiting for her. The staff greeted her by name. They offered tea, but most importantly, they listened. As she was wheeled toward gate C3, she saw it. A simple wooden bench surrounded by flowers in a quiet corner. There was no ribbon, no music, no crowd, just the bench, and a mother helping her elderly father sit down gently. Agnes watched quietly as they settled in. Then she walked over, touched the plaque, and sat next to him. The man smiled. "Nice seat," he said. "It is," she replied. "Took me a long time to get here." That evening, Agnes sat by the airplane window as the flight ascended. She stared out at the clouds, thinking of her husband, her son, the little boy Marcus, and all the silent travelers she had walked for. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't even tired. She was full of purpose. As the plane cruised smoothly into the twilight, she whispered to herself, "I may have walked alone that day, but I won't die invisible."